Welcome to Adobe Live. Thank you so much for joining us today for this amazing illustration stream. And today our guest is the awesome Tyler Pate. How are you doing today, Tyler?
I am wonderful. Glad to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. So excited to see what we're going to be working on today. But before we get going, I just wanted to give you guys a reminder to start your day with the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge hosted by Sam Peterson. That was actually the stream that just ran right before us. And it will also be running every single morning for the next 2 weeks at 9 a.m. Pacific. And please don't forget to tune in to challenge yourself with a brand new prompt every day. And up until now, we can go ahead and introduce you, Tyler. We can give everyone an idea of who you are and maybe show off some of your work.
Yeah, awesome. Well, my name is Tyler Pate. I am a art director, illustrator, graphic designer, creative. But I've been doing this for, man, I'm approaching 10 years as a milestone for me, and I've done agency work to freelancing to corporate to just having fun. And I think I've been able to have a lot of fun. You know, if you check out my Instagram or even my Behance, all these different social sites, I'm just constantly posting, constantly trying to just create fun things and ideas that maybe I don't ever get that client, but I'll just create it anyways and put it out there in the universe. And it's been really exciting. Whole bunch of
Yeah,
vector art.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I've known a lot of artists that will make like personal projects like that and just throw them into their portfolio and kind of just hope that, you know, maybe they'll get a client that they weren't
Yeah.
expecting to. So yeah, awesome. I am such a huge fan of your work. I personally don't do vector art, so I am very impressed with artists that can do vector illustration, and your work just has so much detail attached to it. Oh my gosh, just and you say that on your Instagram you do these illustrations in like a couple hours. Oh my goodness. Oh, so fast. It's so impressive. And I
It,
also just love all of your food art.
thank you.
So beautiful. Yeah, of course.
And that prompts us, doesn't it, to what we're getting
Yes.
into. Lo and behold, more food art.
More food art.
Yes. So I'm gonna jump right in. Yeah, shall we?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm going to go
Okay.
ahead and say hey to everybody in the chat. How are we doing today? Hi, Wade. Thank you so much for moderating for us today. Hi, Ernesto. Hello, Robert. Welcome. Araka, welcome. Thank you guys so much for joining us, Tanya. And raise your hand in chat if you are a fan of grilled cheese or just cheese
Ooh.
in general. And also, if you're not a fan of grilled cheese, what is your other favorite lunch snack or breakfast item or any kind of what's your favorite food? What's your favorite food?
That's simple enough.
Throw some
That's a good
emojis
one.
in chat.
What is your favorite food, Cody?
I'm definitely a big fan of cheese.
Okay.
I love some good mac and cheese and some comfort
Nice.
food. And
Nice.
on the flip side of that, I also really love sushi. So
Ooh, sushi is a really good one.
yeah.
There's a sushi place that's down from where I stay, and it's a weekly endeavor if I can make it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's
Definitely.
the best.
Clever in chat says one of the most wonderful foodstuffs is grilled cheese. All right, so it looks like you're using the pen tool here. What's your process for starting one of these illustrations?
Yeah, so I'll sort of jump back over here. I typically sketch in a notebook. So I'm still old school. I don't do digital sketches as much, but whenever I do, I'll usually sketch something in my notebook and scan it or take a picture and drag it on over to Illustrator or sometimes Photoshop, but always put it on its own layer. That's kind of a trick of the trade that I do, and I'll lock that layer and then I'll just kind of work above it. So sometimes if it's a complex illustration, we're talking multiple layers, but for this, we might get one or two layers into this, just depending on where we go. But after that idea is pretty solid and unified, I'll then sort of jump in and start outlining the basic shape. So what I do know by looking at my sketch is we have, the traditional bread slice. That's going to be that top layer. So I'm going to go ahead and just create that outline of a slice of bread. And I'm going to get everything such as the little indentions and stuff that are going to be on the bread, just like I need it in a flat kind of above view, kind of like what you're seeing here. And once I get that right and feeling good, I'll start skewing it and building it into a perspective. And that's going to be my base to pretty much the whole illustration.
Interesting. So I'm actually not an Illustrator user. So I am kind of like brand new to these tools. Illustrator has kind of always intimidated me. Like, if you were talking to somebody who, like me, who was a beginner to Illustrator, what tool do you think would be most beneficial to start trying to learn if you wanted to make vector illustration?
I think it's a preference for sure. I'm biased where I love the pen tool. And you'll see that's primarily what I'm going to use to build this, and it's pretty easy for me because I use a stylus and a Wacom, so I'm constantly like plotting little points, and I've gotten to be pretty quick with doing it. But I love the control that you get, and it's not like you can't do this with the brush or the pencil tool. It's similar way. It's plotting these points, but I just love the control because sometimes my hand strokes are just, they'll get off or not consistent with, trying to get the straight line or even the right curve. But with these points, you're able to swing these little arms and handles out. And that helps you with your curves, and you can select individual ones. Typically, I'm using a keyboard shortcut, and I'll just kind of run through this real quick. I'll merge these to where I'll click on this node, and then you could sort of tweak one side, or you can, I think you could hold like plus, I could drag them, and you could individually move them like how this is going. And then if you're plotting them, so if I have the pen tool right now, I can just sort of swing that arm as I'm building this shape.
Oh yeah.
Which is pretty helpful. And then even, let's say if I'm trying to make this to curve back or go sharp, like a sharp angle here, I can hold Option and it changes my cursor. You see how it changes it back to the curve tool or the angle tool? And then I can just drag and then change it dramatically. And you could do that on the fly so easily with your keyboard. So I'm constantly doing this type of stuff. And it's come in handy for illustrating. Especially doing something like this, because I'm gonna be working with basic shapes, and I wanted to pick something that it's working with our time frame, but also it's interesting and can be very fun to look at. I'm trying to make sure I don't know, what do you call that? Is that like the top of the loaf of the bread, that little curve?
Yeah, like the overflow, I guess.
What's the name of that? I don't know. All right, so I'm gonna offset this. This is how I'm gonna get the crust on the bread.
Okay, so offset path.
And you could do this with a stroke, or you could sometimes do it with a stroke and then outline that stroke, or you could just do it offset path, and I'll just kind of get it to where it looks.
Instant crust. That works great.
I know, and I'm just gonna use just rough colors. These aren't gonna be anything that we'll probably stick with, but just so that once we're starting to build these shapes, we start to see the differences. And like I said, the crust, the bread, even the different angles are going to bring in more colors, because we're talking about the left side, the right side, to the front. All those are going to come into play here really soon. So we'll go ahead and start making these types of shapes. It's like all the little unique pieces of bread.
Ernesto in chat says, how will you be adding the pencil head eraser egg Easter egg for your branding on the grilled cheese sandwich, or are you going to maybe a pencil going through the bread?
Ooh, it's always a good. Ernesto is the best. He's always thinking about those things, and it's exactly what creating these concepts have to do. So I'm probably gonna put a pencil through it. My sketch doesn't show that, so thanks for reminding me.
Yeah. And also, if you guys are unfamiliar with Tyler's work, he will add in like just a number, like a number 2 pencil going through his artwork a lot of the time.
Yeah, there's some things I like to put in there to add consistency to my work or make it sometimes just that last laugh.
Yeah.
I try not to take this too serious, especially if it's for fun. So I'll put a couple goofs in there for me to laugh at, and sometimes it might be gross, it might be a little hair, I don't know. This is food, but I've been known to do that.
Ernesto gave us a name for the top of the bread. He said bread muffin top, which I guess could work. Bread, yeah, it's a bread muffin top.
I mean,
it's
if
the same thing.
You put some pants on it if you want.
There you go.
There you go. Now we're talking. But yeah, that's kind of like the base shape there. And again, I'm trying to think ahead while I'm making this, because once I start putting that perspective to it, it's kind of hard to go back from there. So what I'm looking at, if I kind of talk you through it, is, so I'm looking at just this top shape here, which is going to be the top of the bread. So we got the crust, which is going to be what we have here. We have these little indentions in the bread. Those are going to be coming in handy once we start putting in perspective. And then all this stuff like the inside of the slice or the cheese, that's going to be something that we're going to build in perspective. But everything else is, I think that's probably about right. The only tricky thing with this, and I'm going to probably play around with some trial and error, is getting these angles, because we have a slice piece that's angled differently than the other. I put that on myself in a time crunch. For some reason, I don't know.
Sometimes you just got to challenge yourself.
If that's what you want to call it. Call it
accidentally.
Yeah, getting nervous is what I call it. I'm actually gonna add a stroke to this. This is like I was saying, it's one way to do that crust would be a stroke. And I'm doing this because I was like, I think it could be a little thicker. Rather than going through the process of offsetting the path again, I'll just add a stroke and then outline it. So it's just like a subtlety of size. Let's see, outline stroke. And now we have that shape back. Okay. I think this is probably going to be good for now. But what I will do is I would hold Option, and you see how the cursor changes a little bit? And if you drag, it's going to duplicate. So that's a good little trick right there with duplicating shapes. And one reason I'm duplicating this is I always like to have a spare in my back pocket. And this is the spare. In case I mess up this perspective, I can go back to the original always. So it's always nice to have this off to the side.
I do that with my illustrations as well. I always have a copy layer just in case.
Yes, it happens. Sometimes you get too far down and realize I should probably start over. Right? It's just part of it. Okay, so the next big step that I have is the transformation tool. There's a couple different ways you could do this. I prefer the transformation tool just so that I can skew and sort of distort my object as needed. And again, there's no precision in this situation, such as mathematical perspective, or even if I went to my perspective grid, which I could do that, and I could build this thing in like the plug and play perspective that Adobe has. But I just choose this. It's a little more free flowing. It gives me a little more wiggle room into making it how I want. And you see I'm sort of distorting this until I get my angle to look the way I want. So,
again, wow, that's so easy. Makes perspective so much more approachable.
It is, and once you wrap your head around perspective, and it's just consistent lines for the perspective that I go for. If you were to do like a vanishing point, then you're gonna have everything sort of go into like a, what would you call that? Like it's gonna have more depth to it, and all the lines are gonna go to a center vanishing point. My illustrations like this never do that. It's more so like what you would experience if you were building this in a 3D program, more than likely. But I don't have an expertise in 3D programming. I would love to commit to it, but I've just grown to love vector too much. Okay.
Tanya in chat is asking, where do you find that transform tool in the menu?
So it looks like this. If you see where my cursor's at, that's what it looks like. It's this little cursor with a box around it.
Gotcha.
But what I typically do, is like if I was building this, I will simply click on the E. E on your keyboard is the shortcut for Mac. So let's say if I was to start from scratch, press E, and it should pop up if you have your object selected. So that's the trick. Make sure you have an object selected, and then it'll pop up.
Wade is asking, which graphic tablet are you using?
I am using a Wacom Cintiq. So it's one with the screen on it. So I'm able to, so I'm looking at a screen here, and then I have an external monitor above my screen, just to give you some preference of how I arrange my work setup. But it's good. I've been using this for, man, a while. 2015. So how many years is that? 5, 6 years? 7 years? What time is it? I don't know.
I don't know what year it is.
I don't know. Okay, so I need to get into slicing this bread. So I think what I'm gonna do is go back to my trusty pen tool. I think I'm gonna go diagonally. That's how we slice bread, right?
That was actually Ernesto's question here in chat. Do you slice your bread diagonally or not? Typically, obviously, in this illustration, it's diagonally, but...
I mean, that's a funny question. I never think about it. I do always go diagonally, though. So is there a preference in the chat?
I do diagonally if I do cut it. I feel like it tastes better when it's cut diagonally. I don't know what it is.
You think so? Maybe it's like a nostalgic thing. You ever
Yeah.
think about that?
It's a very childlike thing, isn't it?
Maybe. I don't know. It's like I was raised to cut diagonally. I don't know. What's happening? All right, so I'm trying to figure out. All right, there's my little dots. I was wondering what happened to my little imperfections. Sometimes whenever you're using the pathfinder tool, which is what I just did to cut it diagonally, it'll rearrange your layers. So some things might get shifted to be underneath and sometimes over. All right, so I think it's grouping too. Okay, we're gonna grab these. We have a slice now. So here's gonna be the tricky part that may or may not work. So if I ever think that, always duplicate. Now we need to distort this one just a little bit more. But I'm also being mindful of the object not getting too wonky and weird, because it could get skewed in a way that doesn't really fit the perspective I'm trying to go for. And again, I know it seems like a lot of what I'm doing is kind of eyeing it up. I mean, if this was something that needed to look exactly like the sketch, maybe it's better just to draw this with a pen tool. But since it's a little more loose and it's our concept and we're just having fun, I'm just gonna sort of build my own perspective here. Get it close to it. Try to think about what that looks like in reality. Like if I was to slice this and put it to the side, how does that look in perspective to the piece that's still here? And making sure it doesn't get too small. Sometimes whenever you're transforming it like this, it shrinks the object. Let's see. Well, that's close. If we want to be sticklers about it, I guess we could just overlay it completely. And we could also do this. This is another trick. If you double click on your sketch layer, you can turn that into a template. which dims that image and everything there. Uh-oh, get out of here. And then that allows us to see through our layers a little bit, which is always helpful.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. This always comes in handy when you have very complex illustrations and you still need that reference layer. And you could do that for images, such as I could have an actual image of a grilled cheese there and it'll dim that image. It's not just because it's an actual sketch, which is really nice. Okay, I think that's good enough for the perspective. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drag this off to the side so I can see it in comparison to the sketch. And this is what's the easiest part. I'm gonna select the entire thing, Command C, and then Command F. And what that just did was that copied and pasted into place. So there's a duplicate right there. With that still selected, I'm gonna hold Shift after I've started dragging, and it's gonna bring it down a little bit. And it's not gonna shift it left or right, it's just gonna go straight down. Because if you're ever dragging things while holding Shift, it goes, what is it? Linear and vertical on the movement. I can also just merge this so it's a single shape. And since I know this is going to be the side of the bread, I'm just going to change the color again so I could see kind of what I'm working with here. And I'm going to, let's think about the thickness of this bread. What should we do? How thick is this bread? Talking about some Texas toast? Are we talking about some Wonder Bread? What are we thinking?
I don't know. What do you prefer? Thick or thin bread slice?
For a grilled cheese, I feel like a grilled cheese needs to be a sourdough bread or something along that line.
Good. Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's probably a little thicker, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll do that.
Some hefty bread.
Some hefty bread. Hefty
yeah.
bread. That sounds like a great brand name. Did you pick up a loaf of hefty bread? Okay, so I am going to start connecting these different shapes. And what I'm doing, again, you could be as precise about this or as loose, as long as these points are touching the right point of that curve, it should be exact. And that's what I'm trying to do, is sort of fake that 3D look. I'm just trying to connect this because we're gonna use the Pathfinder tool and merge this shape. So as long as I'm just getting that connected, just like that. I don't care where this other side of the shape goes because I'm gonna send it back. And then now that's starting to look more 3D, you see?
We have bread.
We have bread. We have half a bread. A bread.
A bread.
Yeah, half a bread. Okay, here we go. And yeah, if you do Command Y, you're able to see outline mode, by the way. That's what I'm doing right here when I'm switching in and out. And that's allowing me to see all these different vector shapes that sometimes overlap. And also it helps to see the exact point of that shape. Because I'm just trying to connect these dots, essentially.
Right. It kind of helps you to just only see the paths without the shapes getting in the way.
Yep. Because sometimes, I'll show you with this one. Let's say, yeah, so if I went straight down to like each of these points, if I went from this point to this point, you would sometimes think, all right, well that connects it. But since there's a curve that goes adjacent from it, like that, we have to account for that. So what we have to do for that is this point's not going to go on that edge. It's actually going to fall into that curve so that it's a seamless transition. So you see, There's always a point where it overlaps. And you kind of have to find that. So it looks nice and smooth. Sometimes you have to zoom in. Tremendous. And it'll get weird sometimes. Always trust the outline mode. Sometimes, I don't know if this shows up on your end, but you can see it looks like it's off. It's like the color, you can kind of see, and this is as far in I could zoom. But if you go to outline mode, you can see exactly where that shape is falling. About right there, I think.
Are you kind of just like eyeballing it, or are you actually using those numbers that are on the cursor there?
I am, it's a little of both. What I'm doing is it's like I'm using my smart guides that are snapping it to the closest point. So if you turn your smart guides on, that's sometimes whenever you see like that little, it can, what is going on? That, yeah, it sort of helps you get close to the shape you're trying to. I think that's part of the program helping you out and saying, oh, I think you're trying to go here, and it'll sort of jump to it, which comes in handy. But I'm constantly turning that on and off. Sometimes it gets a bit annoying because it'll try to predict where you're going, and it's like, I'm not trying to do that. So I'll turn it on and off as I'm working. And to do that is, I think it's up here. I usually use the key command for it. Smart guides. Yeah. So Command U if you want to turn that on or off, which comes in handy. Okay.
Yeah,
so,
smart guides are super helpful. I use them in my work a lot as well.
Do you primarily use Photoshop for yours?
Yes, I work in Photoshop and also Fresco too.
Oh, nice. I still need to jump in Fresco. I hear so many good things about it.
Oh yeah, you know, it took me a long time to even get my first iPad. I've had it for a couple years now, but I knew I wanted to try to learn Fresco just for the convenience of being able to draw wherever instead of having to, you know, be at my desk with my Wacom tablet. It took me, you know, a while to get the learning curve down for a new program, as any art program does. But now I actually use Fresco more than Photoshop.
Wow, really?
I love it so much.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And also with Creative Cloud, they're both connected really well. So like you can start a piece of artwork on your iPad on Fresco, and then it'll automatically save to the cloud. And then when you sit back down at your desk for Photoshop, it's just automatically there in Photoshop.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so nice.
Yeah, it's always good to find those new programs that make life easier.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I have been doing is I copied the same angle, because that's not a straight line. Remember how we were trying to find where that point should be on that curve? So that technically made it slightly skewed. So I just copied that line. I'm not going to try to repeat that in any other way other than copy paste. So I copied the line, and I'm trying to match it up right here on the point of the white portion of the bread. Because, you know, think about the sketch again. The crust should also fall down the line to what gives it that thickness. These are terms we're gonna make up here. The inside of the bread, I guess.
the bread crustiness.
Yes. the forward facing piece of the crust.
Yes.
All the terminology of bread that I don't know. Okay, so I've done the same here, and I'm going to use the merge tool, or shape builder tool. Let me see if I can find it in here so I can, show everyone where I'm pulling. So if you have your object selected and you also use the shape builder tool, you see how it sort of highlights the different areas that are overlapping. So I'm going to use this and just draw a line where that shape was that highlighted, and it actually cut that piece out.
Wow.
So that's like
incredible.
That's an incredible tool. I use way too much because it's so great. So with that, we were able to define our crust like you see here. but also define the white portion of the bread, which we're going to change the color to get our perspective. See how that, look at that. It's starting to look 3D, right?
Magic.
It feels like it sometimes. I'm going to delete these extra lines that were made, because sometimes whenever you're making shapes with the shape builder tool, it'll just cut off edges and pieces of like fragments of that shape, and just they'll still be there. So you need to sometimes go back and clean that up. Because you remember that line that I used to define the crust, it extended the piece a little bit. So there should be a little portion of it on both sides. Also just noticed something too. We can't have that angle. Let's see what we could do to fix that. That's on the curve. Let's move those over. As long as they're snapping together. That sometimes happens whenever you're starting to distort things with the transformation tool. That's probably gonna bother me later. But let's just keep going. We're on a time crunch. Let's see, what can we do next? We could start playing with these. So I'm gonna select all of these little, I need to ungroup that.
Cartoon Katie in chat is asking if you ever dive into the 3D tools in Illustrator.
I do sometimes. It comes in handy for type. If I'm ever doing 3D type or even trying to wrap type around an object, it's a wonderful tool. But for something like this, I don't know, maybe I just enjoy creating it from scratch. But I have had some objects in the past that really drag the program down a little bit to where it's, at least with my machine, it slows it down to where it's hard to work on it. So I try to be efficient in the best ways that I know, so my computer doesn't slow down. And that's why I was saying it also helps to delete those extra elements that aren't necessary, like the little nodes or point or anchor points that sometimes get lost or scattered around. If you're not using them, delete them, because when you are in a file that has thousands of those, your machine's gonna throw down. It's just gonna stop, and it's probably crash on you. But
all of those little points add up over time if you let them.
Yeah, I'm just creating more of these so that we could fill in the space a little bit.
Some more bready details.
Okay, copy, paste into place. So I just duplicated all that. I'm also gonna group it. And this is something that I do just to help my sanity. So I'm gonna change the color to a crazy color that doesn't matter, but as long as it's a different color from anything else. And I'm just going to press down on my cursor or my keyboard. And I want to know, you could probably guess what I'm trying to pull off here.
Creating some perspective, right?
Yep. So this doesn't have to be too accurate, because again, I'm thinking about this material and it's bread. So those are usually so random and imperfect. So I'm not too concerned with getting those exact, because it's going to have the same illusion to it. Okay, so that's what I've done with that. I'm going to select everything again, go to my Pathfinder, and click divide. So I just cut into those objects just to show you. That's what happened, right?
Oh.
So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select the lighter piece, which you see that it's throughout the whole design. While that's selected, I'm going to go to select, same, fill color. And now it just selected all of those same shapes and colors. I'm going to do command copy. So now that's in my clipboard. And this is, follow along with this one. So I'm going to now not click off of anything, do Command Z, 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 all the way back to the original. Sometimes I could just delete that. I just don't need that pink color that I had. And then before I do anything, Command F. So now it pasted that object that we just created right on top of the original. And it's a different color. Or it's the same color now. So what I'm gonna do is, yeah.
Oh, wow.
So that hopefully you're able to follow along on that. I know it seems probably complicated and overdone in some areas, but it's just a way that I found that it keeps me efficient, but also gets the object I'm creating in the exact spot that I need it. And as long as you sort of be aware of what's in your clipboard, and then when you're moving around and going back and forth with Command Z, you could just paste it into place.
I've noticed just watching this workflow that you use a lot of keyboard shortcuts. I'm sure that helps your workflow go so fast. I was just mentioning at the beginning of the stream that you do these illustrations, in a couple of hours time. So, I should really get into using some more keyboard shortcuts because, man, I'm sure it can save a lot of time.
Yeah, it's a game changer. And again, it really depends on what you do for fun or for a profession. Since I'm working heavily in Illustrator, Photoshop, and InDesign, and sometimes After Effects, it's just such a game changer to have the keyboard shortcuts. Which that's honestly the pros and cons of an iPad. I know you could have a keyboard, but maybe somebody in the chat knows better than I would, but I don't know if it's the same. I know the programs aren't as powerful, but there's pros and cons to everything.
Yeah, I haven't actually used any of the other iPad programs like Photoshop or Illustrator on the iPad, but I have gotten used to the hand gestures, the
nice.
touch gestures for Fresco, which helps a lot. And again, since this was my first iPad, it took me quite a while to get used to doing that because I'm so used to using my Express keys on my Wacom tablet and also keyboard shortcuts. So there was a learning curve, but again, and now it's muscle memory. So yeah, works out great.
I'm trying to figure out if I should probably have had a reference to bread. Is there usually like a difference in the height of the white bread to the crust?
No, I don't believe so.
All right.
I think because it's a knife slicing straight down.
You're right.
On the loaf, so it's going to be one single plane.
Okay, so I'm just adding some more of these little imperfections on this different side of the bread. And this is what really comes into play with color. That perspective really happens when you start adding color and showing different hues or highlights of that color palette that you've defined. It really brings it together nicely. Let's see.
Annika in chat has a question. Does Tyler have any tips on finding one's style when creating vector art?
Well, that is definitely different for everyone. Because I still think with my style, it's evolving. I don't think I ever got to a point where it's like, all right, this is unique completely. It's changing. I have interest in other styles, so I don't want to limit myself too much, but I definitely explore different things. I might find an artist or some designs that's like, oh, that is such a cool style. Like, I wonder how they did that. So I'll just start exploring, creating things and like experimenting with what I think they might be doing and maybe put my spin on what I think I would do with that style. And then before you know it, you do that over a couple years or tries of illustrating, you will develop your own path that you're going to approach every time. And I guess that's how you define your style. But I've heard different stories. That's why I hesitate on the right way of doing it. And I think it works differently for everyone. But for me, that's what I've done. I'm curious to how things are made. And if it's a cool style, especially with working for an agency or freelancing, sometimes you have to you have to get the style the client wants. So it's not always about the style that I want to do or the style that I'm most known for. It's just what comes with the trade.
Yeah, definitely. I would absolutely agree with your opinion on that. I, a lot of the time, will describe personal style as just basically a culmination of all of these teeny tiny little decisions that the artist makes on a personal level, and also just how you solve critical thinking problems. Artwork is a lot of critical thinking solving. Like it's almost like a puzzle. Like, okay, I can't draw this this way, so how am I going to figure out how to draw this in my own way?
100%.
So it's like you said, like that's basically how I found my style is, you know, I would admire all different kinds of styles, and I would say, oh, I love how this person drew this rock, for instance, and I would try to recreate that in my own way. And sometimes it doesn't work out, and sometimes it does. And, you know, some days I have, you know, epiphany moments where I'm like, oh, I finally get it. I know how I'm going to draw rocks now, for instance. You know, and so it's kind of just like trial and error. And it also just takes an extended period of time of experimenting over and over again too.
It does. And I don't know. I debate and reflect a lot about, you know, my path and, you know, how I got to where I am or where I want to be as an illustrator. And sometimes it's just realizing that it's patience and consistency. And there's times where it's like, oh, I just want to be here with my artwork. I just want to be to this level, and that style needs to be mastered. And it doesn't work that way. You have to be patient, and it's so funny because once you start seeing yourself get there, it's like, oh, I see what everyone that was older than me or more advanced than me meant by saying just keep practicing, keep working on it, and it takes a lot of time, and I'm sure you know that too with your illustrations.
Oh yeah, definitely. I know sometimes I think people, including myself, hate to hear oh, you just need to practice. On one hand, it's kind of true. Practicing, but also practicing intentionally, I think, is more apt.
Yeah, you have to hold yourself to it, especially for passion projects or, like I was saying, just creating projects that I've always wanted to work on, but maybe the client never knocks on the door. So it's like, just create it, make it up. And I always advocate on that because at the end of the day, you may not have gotten paid or you may not have worked with that client, but you created an idea that you had.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best goal at the end of the day because it didn't exist before and now it does. And that's, I preach that to everyone because that is the beauty of this design and creative path that we've picked is you can create anything and it doesn't have to exist before you create it. You can make it exist, which is always fun.
And also, even if you know, a client might not necessarily be interested in specific projects, you know, I'm sure you still would have learned something from that project, you know, that you might bring into a future project that you do work with a client on, you know.
100%. I've only just gotten to this point in my career where I'm having clients reach out to me with examples of work that I've done. They're like, we want you to do this. And that's the best feeling because I now know that what they're referencing or what they're pointing to was something that I did for fun.
Right.
And that's the secret sauce. Because something that I did 3 years ago for fun is now a client project. And I'm just drawing and doing like what we're doing here. I need to get this.
Speaking of doing projects for fun, what is your favorite subject to create in an illustration?
Subject? Oh, well, food is a good one.
Yeah, of course.
I like like drawing objects.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about that for me. Just I have a very like strange fascination with perspective and like isometric or things that appear to be miniature. It's like I always like to illustrate things that looks like it's like it's like a tiny cheeseburger. Not to get back to food, but it's one of those things that it's really fun and satisfying, and I could kind of create my own representation of it. It's like, oh, well, we know what that object is, but I've never seen it like that. It looks like it's some sort of surreal painting. You could change the colors and have fun with it. I'm just also, by the way, just creating this cheese. Trying to figure out the best way of doing this.
Right.
Which, if that
Would
says
you?
anything,
All right. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, if that says anything, it's trial and error. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know for sure every time.
I was just about to ask, like, are you trying to make this cheese into like one single shape here, or are you going to be doing it in multiple different shapes?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Because I'm gonna go back to my sketch, and this is what having a sketch and an idea ahead of time is helpful. Because I was just creating this from nothing in this program, I would lose it. I need some sort of foundation.
I actually find it pretty fascinating to watch your workflow here. Is that like for me, typically I would work on top of my sketch, and I think that a lot of artists would, but you're actually working beside your sketch instead of like tracing over it. Is there a reason for that?
It changes. It depends, because I sometimes need to visualize the whole thing. So I need to see the whole sketch, and I need to see that what I'm like right now, what I'm doing is I'm illustrating this, what it's going to probably be one piece. So I'm having to see where I'm at now, but also see where I'm going to go. And I know it's going to end over here on the edge of the bread, and it's going to sort of, curve under. So I already know I need to separate the bread further apart.
Right.
So I'm typically thinking about a couple things at once. And if it was on top of each other, I would probably be hiding a lot of it and covering it up as I'm drawing, which gets counterproductive for me. But there's no right or wrong way. I mean, there's sometimes, if I'm ever illustrating faces, that's the one that I have to draw directly on top. Because you have to capture that likeness, and that is the hardest thing. For anyone who wants to draw faces, likeness is a beast. Because you can draw a face, and you can draw someone that looks like a head or a person, but doesn't look like the person you're going for.
Yeah.
That's tricky, because then you're hyper focused on features of eyes and nose, and you just have to sort of figure it out.
Yeah, likeness is very difficult. I actually don't really enjoy drawing humans all that much, but I will do commissions for people, like portrait commissions. Oh, nice. But in my very kind of simplistic style.
Yeah.
So creating a likeness of somebody in an even more simplistic style can be challenging, and you have to like get the exact angles of the jaw, or you really have to pick up on those very specific characteristics that somebody has, like their hairstyle, or maybe they have a wide nose, or something that can really like differentiate them, and can really like make them stand out and be like, oh, that really does look like that person.
It's
very
tricky,
particular.
I know. I hear a lot of feedback from whenever I do portrait drawings, because I've done a few, and I've only recently gotten to a point where I've been able to do actual band posters, and I had to do that,
nice.
Which was, talk about the pressure on that for me, because it was a band that I'm obsessed over, and
that's so
love
cool,
his music.
And
it's like, you better get his face right. You better get his face right. There is no maybe it's right. But I say that because it was tough. It was a hard one to just to nail down. But once it got to a point where, okay, it's close, but maybe we need to restart. And that's a hard pill to swallow. and I had to do it for that one. I was finished pretty much, other than the fact it didn't look like. So I doubled back and redrew it, spent the extra time, and I got it. I was able to get it nailed down, and it helps to honestly do what we're doing right now. Talk to other designers and artists. Like, take a look. Does it look right? How does it? What could I do to, change it? Get a little critique in there, because that's what helped me finalize it.
Yeah, I'll usually ask my husband, like, "Hey, does this art look like this person or no?"
Yeah. You know what's so brilliant about that, and I don't know your situation, but it doesn't even have to be an artist. It doesn't even have to be a designer. It doesn't look like someone, and
yeah, exactly.
you can get that from anyone. I mean, I do that all the time with friends, family, and it comes in handy. I'm just trying to add some shapes here.
Do you have a subject that you don't necessarily enjoy doing for like personal artwork?
Subject. Name some. What you mean?
Just any, like you said, you really love drawing objects. Is there something that you don't like drawing?
I don't know if there's necessarily like a real strong disagreement of liking drawing, but I do notice that I gravitate, if it's just for me, for fun, on the side, I sometimes gravitate like almost a cartoon, surrealist look and vibe. So that could be something that's nostalgic, anything from, I don't know, Donkey Kong from a video game, or Mario. I definitely pull a lot of inspiration from those areas. I guess if it's for me, I probably wouldn't dabble in something that I'm not interested in.
Right.
If it's like a subject matter or a person that, I'm not like a fan of that band, I probably wouldn't be drawing them. But I'm typically bringing what I like into my art if it's for fun.
Speaking of video games, I do really love your illustrations of the old game consoles. Those are pretty awesome. I love it.
That's another one of those where I wanted to get better with perspective, so I just created a series, and that was one that was easy for me to do, because it's like I just love reminiscing about the old, or the first, like, what was your first Game Boy, or what was your first console, what was your first game in general. And it's like, well, some of these things I haven't thought about since I've, jumped into my career and drawing all the time. It's like, oh, I could double back and then reimagine it and draw it in my style, because I haven't done that yet. And that's kind of how that sort of came about. And then it was a game of, well, which one am I missing? It's like, which console is not there? And then I'm picking favorites. There's some that it's like, I didn't play that one. But it is fun. And the trend of that, and I'd like to hear what you think about your process, is, do you always pull from things that you see, or things that inspire you, or things from your past or childhood? Like, how do you pull your artwork? Because mine's a mixture.
Yeah, I would definitely say a big portion of my personal work is inspired by Winnie the Pooh is a really big inspiration for me since I was a kid. I also just really, really love gardening and farming. So a lot of those subjects are involved in my work. I tend to kind of have like a very like farm country-esque energy to my work. And I also just really love autumn. So I've always been really drawn to earth tones, like deep, rich earth tones. So I use that in my work a lot. So yeah, definitely highly influenced by my interests. Funny enough, I actually a big part of my life is video games, and I used to do a lot of video game artwork, but since I started creating my own characters, I haven't done a lot of fan art in recent years.
Oh yeah.
I kind of forget almost nowadays that I can do fan art. I haven't done fan art in so long.
Yeah. It is. It is one of those that, you know, you can get easily caught up in what you're working on, or depending on the project complexity, it's you might get a little burned out. I do sometimes, and it's like I take a break, and whenever I do get back into making stuff for fun, it's kind of useful for me to just go back into my sketchbook, and it's like, oh, I'm seeing these ideas or show references that I've sort of quickly sketched in my book, and I was like, oh, let's just make this. I think I'm ready to make something new. Okay,
Yeah, absolutely.
Trying to get this
cheese is looking more cheesier by the minute.
I know, I'm trying to get it to look right. I feel like it still looks a little off. How's the chat doing? Any questions in there?
No questions, but we do have Alessandra in chat saying, I don't like drawing hands or feet.
Hands are hard.
Yes, hands are hard.
So you're not
That
alone.
actually kind of goes back to my thought earlier about kind of a personal style. A funny thing about my style is that part of the reason, if you're familiar with my work, a lot of the time for my characters, I'll draw dot eyes on my characters instead of drawing like more realistic eyes. And the reason is because my problem solving technique for that solution was to just draw regular dot eyes because I couldn't draw more realistic eyes.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know what? I'm just gonna draw dot eyes. And it kind of and it became like an iconic thing of my style, unintentionally.
Yeah, that really goes back to how you define your style or find it, right? You either gravitate towards what makes the most sense efficiency wise, or what you're most interested in. Because I dabble in experimenting with different eyes too, because I love like the classic like anime look sometimes, and those eyes are sometimes complimenting for whatever the subject matter is. So because I recently did a fun little pattern of these little like ninja lemons.
Oh yeah, I saw that on your Instagram. Yeah,
so I did those, and I had a couple different variations of the eyes, and I was like, how should I make these eyes? But I decided finally, I was like, I like how these look, because it's like they're peeking out up under the bandana. But yeah, and sometimes there's a lot of thought in that, and sometimes it's just, yeah, that makes sense.
And thank you, Wade, for posting Tyler's Instagram and Behance in the chat. Don't forget to follow Tyler if you'd like to check out some more of his work. Any of the work that we've been discussing on stream, you can go check that out on his portfolio. And yeah, this cheese is really coming along. I like the stringy holes that you're adding in. It looks really nice.
Thank you. Yeah, this just adds a little more dimension to it. And I'm gonna cut these out of the cheese, so I'm just using these as like placeholders.
Right.
Trying to figure out what's the appropriate amount of stringiness.
How do you come up with your color palettes? What are your favorite colors? Do you tend to lean more towards warm tones or cool tones, or what's your thought process there?
Definitely warmer tones. I love exploring like tans and creams and off whites. That's kind of my go-to, especially if I'm doing artwork for myself, and I typically do that under the creative pane. If you check out my work, you could probably start seeing which is which, because the color and the perspective is all pretty consistent with those pieces, and they involve the pencil head, which Ernesto was talking about earlier. That's what that refers to. Because I have some branding and little elements that are consistent to that little pencil head guy that I made. Okay. I think that should be good enough to start cutting this cheese.
So what are you using to cut out these holes here?
I'm gonna use the Pathfinder tool.
Okay.
So I'm gonna group all of those areas, make sure my cheese is all together because I think I might need to make this the same. Yeah. Okay, so the cheese is now one whole piece. Okay, so I'm gonna select my cheese, and then I'm gonna select the holes. And like what we did earlier with slicing the bread diagonally, I'm just gonna click on divide. And what that did was that cut all the overlapping shapes like this. So now I'm just gonna go back and delete all those. And the ones, like this seems like it's still there, like the shape is still there. It's just because I'm on the background.
Right.
And then let's make sure this is above. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm gonna move the sketch off to the side. Go ahead and lock that layer, and I'm gonna bring this over so we can start seeing what this looks like on a background. Because that's another thing that can really change the mood. And the colors, you know, I'm pretty loose about the colors at the beginning because I just need to find out what makes the most sense so I don't get this confused with what layer's what. I typically go for tans. Maybe an off-white. Something like that. I'm gonna lock that layer. Actually, let's put that on an actual layer. Not lock the shape. Put that there. Let's just label that BKG. Lock it. Okay, so what are we missing now? This needs to be above. I think we could probably bring the bread down a little bit.
Squish that bread onto that cheese.
Squish it. What am I doing? Something's funky. I think this is a duplicated piece. There we go. Yeah, let's smush it. Yeah, I must have duplicated this at one point. I have 4 pieces of bread on this thing.
Too much bread. Too much bread.
Okay,
unless you want a double decker.
I know that. I don't know if that's a good move. Is that? Could you imagine 4 layers of bread and cheese? Would it be?
I think I'd rather just have 2 separate grilled cheese sandwiches rather than a double decker.
That's a lot of bread and cheese. I'm just gonna do these little floating shapes. Maybe one little. It's like this thing's getting ripped apart.
I've always felt like adding those little bits like crumbs and just like you're adding like little bits of like flinging cheese just makes it look so delectable when it comes to food. Like there's something about the like just little bits of extra, and it doesn't seem like it would add a lot, but it does, and it kind of fills up the white space too.
It totally does, and it gives it its own little world, right?
Yeah.
You start building that environment to where it lives in like a different reality. All right, I'm gonna maybe see if this works. I'm gonna start making the highlights on the cheese.
Okay.
So this might not be the best way. I'm just gonna see real quick. Sometimes I'll see if it makes sense to offset the path because this can sometimes get messy. And then I'm gonna move that shape that I just created up. And I'm gonna make it a little lighter.
Oh wow, yeah. Added some dimension there.
Yeah, and it's pretty simple to do, you know. And look at that. I mean, that's a huge improvement there.
Yeah.
And after doing that, I'm going to start adding those shadows and stuff like that. So to do that, I need to. There's 2 approaches. I could do it the way that makes the most sense, which is this is a straight line. Let's just make a straight line shadow. Or we could think a little more about the material. It's cheese, it's bread. That's a little imperfect, right? So maybe we just freehand this shadow to show that it's sort of like oozing in different ways.
We all love some oozing cheese.
like the classic, like Ninja Turtle pizza cheese.
Yeah, exactly.
The best.
It's just super like falling down like 3 feet.
Yeah. Okay. So that's gonna be a shadow. Let's put the bread on top of that.
That looks great.
Yeah, it's starting to come together. And then we, adjust as needed. Maybe this hole right here wasn't the best one. So I might delete that one.
Robin chat says watching streams makes losing weight pretty tough. I want me a grilled cheese right now. Clever in chat says Tyler's making this look so easy. I could maybe do this in 5 or 10 times the amount of time he's worked.
Well, this is a gluten-free, vegan, everything, 0 calorie grilled cheese.
It's the healthy grilled cheese.
That is 100% vector. Let's see, what else are we missing? We could build that pencil. We can do a pencil real quick. This should be pretty easy to just reference. Let's see that, copy, and then place. Sorry, I'm just gonna do this quick.
Sure. Going back to the color palette question, actually, when you are making your color palettes, do you try to limit your palette or do you use any color? Like, for instance, are you trying to make the pencil the same yellow as the cheese, or is that not something in your thought process when you're working?
Yeah, it's definitely something I think about. I debate back and forth. I always try to limit the color palette to the essential colors. I've always felt that simple is always sometimes better. Because if you complicate it with all these different shades and shadows, sometimes it could be too much, and you realize that, oh, well, this shade's so similar to this one, why not just use that one? And
right.
You can't tell the difference. So yeah, it's kind of an efficiency thing. Efficiency, yeah. But it sometimes changes. I don't make that a hard rule, but what do in here? Let's see.
Noor in chat just said, what's better than a 4 cheese pizza? A 5 cheese pizza.
Yeah, that seems to be the hint that's happening here. I haven't illustrated a pizza. That's gonna be something down the road.
Ooh,
sure.
A pizza. That would be fun. Oh, Carol says, but has he saved lately? Have you? I don't think you've saved the whole time. Good call, Carol.
That's a bad designer. That's what I am. That could have been bad there. Good call. Let's see how imperfect we want this pencil. You know what? I don't even know if... Okay, yeah, that would. I was wondering, it's like, would this even show up? And it's like, we want it to probably go all the way through it, right? So we would see the lead and the pencil on the underside.
Right. How did you come up with the name Creative Pain?
It came about when I was thinking about the creative process, and whenever I was first started out, I always realized that it was a cycle. I don't want to say a vicious cycle, but it was one of those where, burnout is a real thing, and you don't always have the ideas or the answers for what clients need, but what it comes down to is just working at it and just grinding and like making sure that you have a set of things that are goals that you're trying to accomplish, and it's like you just got to focus on that and not get too caught up in the, well, it doesn't look like this, or I don't know what the uncertainty is. And that back and forth led me to realizing that more and more artists that I talk to deal with it in similar ways, meaning like they don't have the answers time as they get a brief or time as the client comes knocking. They have to sit there and work at it and figure that stuff out. That's what makes it a professional a professional. It's just there's a process to it, and realizing that sometimes it could be a grind and a pain. And I was like, oh, like there's a system here. It's like, but it's all fun at the end of the day. It's like that aha moment of you're just gonna keep working and working, and it's like there's a point where if you keep just going after it, you're gonna have that breakthrough. And that breakthrough is either you now have logos to present, you now have an idea to present, or you know how to create something in a new style that you've never created. And that was sort of the beauty that I found in it. It's like accept the pain, accept the creative process, accept the unknown, and it will be all right if you just stick to it. So sort of denounce the negativity with pain. It's embrace it.
Yeah, I really like that. And as an artist, I can absolutely relate to that. I think you got the nail on the head right there.
Yeah, it's like a lot of us deal with it, and I get that question a lot sometimes of, do you ever have burnout? And it's like, yeah.
Absolutely.
Once a year at least.
Yeah.
It's just, how do you deal with it? There's different ways, and I definitely will dial back the amount of work that I'm creating for fun whenever I'm having that. But it's okay. It's just, don't give up. I would never give up and quit illustrating. It's just take time off.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely go through phases of just not creating art at all, like personal art. And I'm one of those artists that like if I'm having art block or burnout, I have to completely step away and just give myself a break. And then I eventually come back and it's all good again. And sometimes when I get back from a break, I'll even have like epiphany moments that I was struggling with things before because I was trying so hard that caused the burnout. I give myself a break, I come back, and I immediately I get it now.
Yeah, that's the best feeling. And
yeah.
And I think what helps is realizing that if you're a long hauler with creating and being a creative and identify as it, you're going to experience that again, and you're going to go through it again and again and again, and accept it. It's okay. And I say it like that because like I had a hard problem with just accepting like, it's a me problem. Like I have burnout because I'm not good enough, or you start comparing yourself to other things that doesn't matter. Everybody goes through their own form of it. Just embrace it, right? And you do have those real epiphany moments, like you said. You come back and it's like, oh, this is fresh, and then all of a sudden you're hungry again. It's like, let's go for it, and that's the best feeling. It's
really encouraging, especially after coming back from a burnout. If you have moments like that, you're like, okay, I got this, let's go.
It's needed sometimes, because if you're doing this for a living and you're working for someone or working at an agency, it can be tough because you don't really get to have those moments to just step away sometimes. But you have to kind of understand your boundaries and expectations, and realizing like, okay, well, I'll work through this. I'll just focus on what the task is in front of me, and just get that done first, and then think about what the feeling of it means, because you could overthink stuff. I overthink things all the time.
Yeah. I actually wanted to get back to your workflow here and ask a question. I noticed when you were initially creating the pencil that it was really short, and I was wondering how you were going to work with that. And then I just saw you extend the length like instantly. How did you do that? That was so cool.
I do that a lot too. Sometimes I'll do that in perspective. So for this pencil, I know that there's the majority of my points are on the bottom and the top. You see them all highlight whenever I select the whole pencil here. I'm just selecting the half that I want to move, and with that direct select cursor, which is this little white one, you could just drag the ones that you, like if I only selected this portion, it moves that portion out.
Right.
So I knew that there's no points on the center of the pencil since this is one shape. So I just grab that 1/2 and move it out.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it comes in handy. I also need to get this thing looking like it's in perspective. It looks very flat.
I also wanted to say that Steve in chat has pointed out that the word pain actually means bread in French.
No way. There you go. We learned something.
The creative bread.
That's great.
Colby, definitely need to rewatch this stream from the beginning later. I'm late. Oh, yes, absolutely. If you guys would like to rewatch this stream at any point, you can do so here on Behance, and you can also rewatch any of our live streams on the Creative Cloud YouTube as well.
Awesome. This is getting a little messy, but it's gonna work out. And we're just along for the ride. So I'm just trying to, not to get derailed from the cheese. We need to get back to the cheese.
Yeah. We have to add the pencil though. I mean, the pencil is essential.
It's a good idea. You can't turn down a good idea.
Absolutely. How long have you been working in Illustrator? Did you start out in Illustrator or did you move to it from a different program?
I definitely started to learn the program in school when I was in college. So we had like the basic courses. We're like, oh, here's your tools, and
yeah,
you know, I didn't dive into the extremes of it, but I had the curiosity. It's like, oh, this looks cool. Like I started realizing that a lot of the posters that I did like, because I love going to the live shows and following bands and stuff like that. So I had an interest for that. And when I realized that a lot of those gig posters were created in a style that was pretty common for Vector and Illustrator, I was like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until starting my first agency job to where I started getting projects where I could explore that program a bit more, and then also play around with that program in my spare time. So I'm like working during the day in the program, and then at night I'm just still drawing some of the things that I want to do for fun. And I think that double dose is what sort of helped me.
Definitely, yeah.
Get in there.
Bring that extra time in.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay, so let's see what perspective angle this should be in. Maybe this side.
So if this pencil is going through this grilled cheese, like if it was stabbed through the grilled cheese, would it have like cheese coming off of it on the bottom?
We could definitely add some. That's a good point.
I guess it depends on where you put it.
I don't know. What do we think? What side of this grilled cheese should it be on? I'm thinking maybe this
chat?
side.
Left or right? What do you guys think?
Let's let the chat decide.
I feel like on the right side it has more space, but then at the same time I'm kind of feeling like it feels more balanced on the left side. I don't know. I'm a little torn.
Yeah, it feels like the balance seems weird on this side.
Yeah.
Because
it feels like too heavy on the right, like that a little bit, maybe.
I think maybe this. Let's try this side. I'm gonna steal this circle from that crumb or that little imperfection that we had. Because that's in the right appropriate angle.
Right. Working with that consistent perspective there.
Yep. So that's probably what we're looking at. and making sure that I'm stretching and resizing this while holding shift so it's keeping it proportionate.
Everyone in chat is saying left, so.
Left? Okay.
Yeah.
Left it is. All right, let's just quickly put this. Right. Duplicate this pencil because we could also mess up. Okay. We're gonna cut the pencil. I'm gonna group it. Do this. Hang on, let's think about this. I think this is the right angle. Oops. Okay, so now we have that. I'm gonna actually back up. I'm gonna steal this thing. I'm gonna go back to where we were. I'm gonna paste that. I'm gonna enlarge it. Send it back. And let's see about making it darker, since we got red there. And then I'm gonna take this pencil. I don't have to worry about it being too exact.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if I was doing this under less of a time restraint, I would probably take the time and clean it up a little bit, but I think we'll get the message across by just doing it like that. But
Yeah, it looks good.
We can make this darker.
Because it's going to be in shadow down there, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's a different approach, but I think it works. We can jump in there. So let's make sure, what are we missing? We're missing this little squiggly thing around it. That's like a good thing. I'm gonna do this quick with just freehand. There's a couple ways we could do this. I'm gonna actually show you both if this works and we have time. Sometimes
We
freehand
have about
this stuff.
half an hour left, so.
Okay. So when I freehand things like this, I'm just trying to think about the curves in between, like the highs and the low points of that shape. Because you could typically tell when something's off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because of the angle. So I'll just manipulate these a little bit so it looks nice and consistent. And this is going to be that little glow that's in the sketch. It's like the holy grail of grilled cheeses. And whenever whenever things like jump back like that, I'm just doing the key command for send to back. So that's helpful.
What is that shortcut?
I think is it hold command and shift and then like left or right bracket. Yeah. And I think that's also, if you go up to objects with that piece selected, I think it's, see if chat might know before I can find it in here. I haven't looked for it in so long. I think it's arrange. Here you go. Yeah, so if you go to objects, arrange, and yeah, bring to front, bring forward. I'm usually doing send to back, so there's a little key commands there. Those come in handy all the time. Let's see if we can, what the right glow should be. Maybe a little more red in there. I don't know. I'm going to show you one trick though that helps me get my color looking the way I want. once I get this illustration in a good stopping point, or at least to a point where I can start thinking about the color more in Illustrator, I'll jump back over to a different program, which I use Photoshop too. Delete these, send it back. Okay. Is there anything we're missing right off the bat? Let's see. Oh, these little stars. These are...
Oh yeah, gotta have the little sparkles. I love the sparkles.
There's a few ways you could do these. Have you ever made these?
Not in Illustrator. Love to see your process.
So this is like a real fast way that I sometimes make them. And there you go, boom.
Oh, was that the Pathfinder tool?
Yeah, I was Shape Builder tool is what I did for that. That's one way of doing it. I know I'm gonna try winging this. There's a way of doing it in, if you have a circle, you could do effect. It's one of these, like effect tools. I think it's pucker and bloat. Yeah, it's this one.
Oh wow, very cool.
Yeah, that's a way I found a couple months ago, and I was like, oh, that's like a fun, efficient way of making it. So then you have that same shape or similar to it.
Yeah, super easy.
And if you wanted to make that into an actual vector shape, you could do expand, and then now it's a vector. Because before it was an effect, so it's nothing you can manipulate too much. But I don't know, which stars do we like? Do we have a preference here?
I think I like the left one personally.
Left one? This guy?
Yeah.
Okay. I can go with that. Make a smaller one. Just put a little twinkle in the sky.
Katie said, okay, that is a really fun way to make a sparkle.
Just put a few around here. Maybe even overlay some on top.
Wade just said, classic pucker and bloat, sometimes the same effect from eating grilled cheese.
That's a good point. Okay, so first thing that I notice right now is it could use another highlight on the cheese. You could do a highlight on the edge here. We could also do real quick, since this is something that I could easily do. We could make some floating crumbs, just to show like the bread sort of being ripped apart, but almost like in a slow-mo way.
Yeah.
Everything's floating in space. Let's see, where's the dark? Here we go. I'm just doing
Zero
this
gravity
really
grilled cheese.
fast. Yeah, this is a space cheese.
Space grilled cheese.
Sometimes copy, duplicate it, shrink the size, maybe flip it around. This is like a really simple way to just be efficient, but also reuse stuff that sometimes you don't ever notice that it's a duplicate. And you can get in here and even like personalize this one a little bit. I would maybe change the angle slightly, but it's still using the same foundation, which is helpful for saving time. Okay, so I'm gonna switch gears. So what I would do with exploring color, again, sure there's a ton of ways to do this. This is just what I sort of gravitate to doing because of two things. Whenever I was starting out illustrating, I enjoyed using multiple programs just so that I could try to master multiple at the same time. And I got into realization that texture was the most efficient for me in Photoshop. It's more precision base in the sense that you can get fine brush strokes. I'm sure you know all about this with your illustrations, and it's really nice to just be able to layer things in a way and mess with opacities, and the biggest thing was adding curves. So I can now start to explore what my illustration looks like after, I put a layer mask on that. Hang on. Delete layer mask. I could start exploring what changing some of these elements. What is going on with this thing? Should start seeing it visually. Yeah, okay. So I can start tweaking the colors slightly. It's giving me a preview of what I could do. And it kind of helps me unify what works, what doesn't. Maybe let's get the green and just add so much more contrast, which looks nice.
Yeah, it really does unify the colors. Actually, I'm noticing like a consistency in throughout all of your work here just by adding the curves. Like now suddenly it looks like your colors that you use in the rest of your artwork.
Yeah, and I guess that's sort of where I have my own presets for my color to keep it consistent. And maybe that helps, define your own style. It's color. Sometimes it's just color. And then adding texture and noise. I even switch it up and I'll do some of these other adjustment layers, like vibrance is an easy one, because you could either figure out if you want to go more saturated or less. Typically vibrance is a nice one. I love a gradient too. Let's see. Let's try a gradient map. Sometimes I'll get color ideas from doing these.
Where did you find that menu there?
The gradient editor is
it's
just up here. If you have your adjustments layer open, like this little panel, it is, I'll start again. It's this guy, gradient map.
Okay.
So if you click on that, it's gonna have a preset. Sometimes defaults to black and white, but there are some other presets that you could explore. These are like the ones Adobe gives you. But I typically keep it to 2, so I'll delete the middle color, and I'll just adjust these 2 milestones. Let's see. Gotta figure out which side's the darkest. This is gonna have to be our darkest. And then this could be our lightest, which I like to go tan, yellows. Give you a whole different vibe.
Yeah.
Which sometimes it's, again, I'm just doing this for finding a fun color. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, that's really
a really
nice.
Fun one. Loses our golden cheese, but that's a fun alternative. Sometimes if that happens, I'll literally just I'll duplicate that layer and I'll save it. I'm not labeling all my layers. I typically do, just for time. So that's a fun color palette. So I'll pull that one to the side, maybe do something with that later, but I'll keep exploring this. And if you double click on that layer, you get this gradient map that brings you back to where we were. So maybe if this was like a golden color, that's still fun.
Yeah.
It's almost like this duotone type color palette now, which that's fun. I do like that. But again, we could stick with our main one. Maybe the chat can decide. We have 3 colors here. Which one?
Carol made the point that blue cheese does exist.
Yeah, and we were talking about some space cheese, so who knows what that could be.
True.
Any preference? What do you think?
I personally gravitate towards warm tones, so I think that I like the golden one.
Yeah. Maybe we stick with that. That's good. Okay. So here's a trick that I sometimes will do. It's like we could just start adding our textures and playing around at this level, or we could bring it back into Illustrator, which do a screenshot of this. I'm gonna flip back over here, bring that in. Now we got a new color palette.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Two ways that we could go from here is if these are live swatches, like what are they called? Like I think they're like universal, or someone could help me out with that. But I think they're universal color swatches. It's where I could just double click the color swatch that I created and it will change that color everywhere that it's being used. You could do it like that, which is the most efficient way, or for the sake of time, we could just select one color and do select same. Let's see, fill color. So it's selecting that same color. I know it's going to be eyedropper tool for this. So boom. Select this because we only have like maybe 5, 6 colors. It's not that many. So we can easily do it like this. And I'm just creating my vector, or updating my vector to our new color palette. Just quickly, I'm just selecting each color and then performing a select all of the same color and eyedropping tool from our image.
Oh, yeah, that saves a lot of time, being able to do everything at once.
And it does help. And it also makes me think about the efficiency with colors. Like, oh, this one's so similar to this other color. Let's just use the same.
Right.
To reduce our color palette. Sometimes it matters, especially if you're thinking about printing it or screen printing it, stickers. Sometimes you have to limit your colors. What am I doing? Fill color. I guess it's just one. Same fill color. And this is just kind of robotic, back and forth, back and forth. But we kind of see it coming together slowly. It's just kind of a little color hack that I found that works. Did I get this color? Select.
Annika mentioned in chat that they're called global swatches.
Global swatches. There you go.
Colby in chat asks, is there a way to make recolor artwork help with this part? Do you use recolor artwork at all?
No. What is that? Something new.
From my limited knowledge of Illustrator, I believe it's a way to, I'm not exactly sure how to find it in Illustrator, but it's a way to actually just like completely change your whole color palette. And
nice.
Like it edits just like your color themes, like you can choose different color themes and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's probably completely eliminate what I just did and make it more
It might,
efficient.
yeah. Maybe you should look into it for your workflow.
For sure. Yeah, that's actually helpful. I'll have to check that out. Yeah, something I was thinking about too is we could probably cast a shadow on this. Let's see what makes most sense. There's a shadow here. So would that mean that this needs to go away from it? I think so. Does that make sense? What do you think?
I think that makes sense.
Like it would be like that, right?
Yeah.
Because this would have to be... Yeah, because if this inside of the sandwich is a shadow, then the light's on
kind of,
here. Okay. So I'm just gonna just sort of put that there. Just move this in. I'm just gonna be rough about this just to save time. But I would probably cut this out using the shape builder tool or pathfinder tool. I'll just do this part.
We have about 10 to 15 minutes left.
Cool.
In the stream.
I think we might get pretty close.
Nice.
I think we're definitely got it come together.
Yeah.
Are we missing anything?
It's coming together and also pulling apart at the same time.
Yes, it is. You know what we could do? We could start adding some highlights and stuff. Let's I'm gonna select a few of these colors and let's create so that we can reference that, and then whenever I'm gonna just keep pulling from this, I'm gonna use my actual brush tool a little bit here, and we could do some highlights, which that always helps bring it together too.
Sure.
I like those last little details. Is that the same color? Yeah. Okay, add. Okay, so let's see. Now you see how complex this thing has gotten.
Yeah.
We're right here.
Oh yeah, just that little line right there, that it's insane how much that adds. It really added like an edge to the bread, almost like a little bit more dimension right there. It looks nice.
It's crazy the little simple details like that just make the most change. I said something earlier. I wanted to explore a highlight on the cheese a bit more. Let's see what that could be. I think that. I sometimes brush to the side just to see a preview of it. There we go.
Ooh, some shiny cheese. Yeah.
That's looking golden. Love that. So I'm just gonna add these highlights. Command Z if it doesn't work, and just redo it until you get it. Again, this is where a drawing tablet comes in handy. It's a game changer. And I can get in here and sort of adjust that curve and line. So this is essentially what you can make with the pen tool. That's why I love the pen tool so much. Because I got familiar with the pen tool first, and then once I dived into brushes, I was able to see that it's just a stroke.
Right.
And you use the same tools to distort and rearrange the angles, which it's kind of like you're learning a few different things at once before you realize it. And it's like, that's helpful. Because once you think you're mastering something, it's like, oh, well, try using that in a different format. It's like, oh, brush tool. Yeah, so I'm just kind of building these highlights throughout. These little details make the most, especially if we got into texture.
Yeah.
We could really bring this out. It's just, the color is a real key here.
It really makes it pop.
And it's so fun. This is the fun part for me. Because as everyone else is seeing it and being like, oh wow, that's coming together, I'm saying the same thing in my head.
Yeah.
It's working. Let's see.
That's actually another question that I love asking artists is what's your favorite part of the process? So
yeah, it's the color.
The details and highlights for you?
Yes, absolutely. Especially when we get the texture. Which I could jump back in. Should we finish this out in vector, or should we just last 5 minutes of texture in Photoshop?
Maybe we should show off some textures so we can let everyone see your process for that really quick.
Yeah, let's do that. So I'm going to get this ready. Copy. I'm gonna go back over the Photoshop. We don't need these anymore since we've kind of already found the color palette we want. And then when we bring it back in, it's that color palette. And there's a couple things that I benefit from by doing the back and forth is we could add more, layers on top of it, adjustment layers, and then all of a sudden we've enhanced it even more, which is pretty fun. But to quickly show you some ways to do texture, I'm going to make a background layer now, because I need to separate that from the artwork. So that's the same color. If you double click on this, it takes me back to the live vector that's still in Photoshop. And see, now this doesn't have a background. Because this is a smart object. So I always keep a smart object for my vectors. So you can go back if you need to. And I could hold Command and click on that smart object and it'll only highlight that piece, which that's key. I mean, that's everything for me. Because then I could just start building layers on top of it. I could do this as like noise 1. That's typically how I would label my stuff. Let's see what I have here. I have some brushes I've accumulated and some I've made and adjusted. There's a lot here. Let's see. I think we're just gonna put a little subtle noise on it. So I've got a few of those, and we're gonna let's just do black. Let's see, our size is 800. Enlarge that a little bit. Maybe switch over to maybe this one. It's hard to see if it's doing it. What's happening? Oh, it's still too small. Yeah, it's because I have this, the resolution of this file is, I think, 200 dpi. So it's just a smaller brush, but it's adding it. It's just hard for us to see it on the screen.
So it's kind of like a spatter brush, it looks like, almost from...
Yeah, it's a subtle noise brush.
Oh, okay.
What's going on with this thing? Let's see. Because if we switch it up, oh, my flow's at 50%. What else is happening? So I will typically start layering my noises from light to dark or dark to light, just to add like subtleties. I don't know why I can't see these. Something weird's going on there. But I could switch
Don't you
up
hate
to
it when that
different...
happens?
I know,
especially on a live stream. Always happens.
I don't know what I'm doing. There we go. It's working. I'm painting something. Okay, so I do also mix it with like a watercolor effect sometimes. Yeah, it's like it's something to do with the hard sensitivity. Let's see. And then I'll play with the adjustment layer. So I'll do like a soft overlay and sort of decrease the opacity. And then I'll do that again, maybe with like a darker color. Let's see, let's find another fun texture here. Yeah, this will be good.
Are these your own brushes that you created, or
some of them are?
Okay, cool.
Yeah, there are some great sources out there. Texture Supply Co. is a good one. Or it's like Retro Supply. It's one of those.
Oh, yes, I've gotten some Retro Supply stuff. Yeah, they got some great textures.
They make some really fun stuff. Yeah, so sort of building it and layering it and messing with those layer values sometimes make the biggest difference. Yeah, I like the soft overlay. So it slowly starts to look like it's almost like a texture palette, almost like paper. And then let's see what we could do next. We could, and I do this a lot with the Creative Paint illustrations. I'll always sort of go back in with like the finest brush I could have, and I'll just sort of add like little highlights like that, or shadows. So we could do little things, get the edge of the crust darker.
I've noticed that in your work you kind of add like a lot of like cracks and like
Mm-hmm.
details like that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I've gravitated to because I like something that looks rough. It's not perfect, but it's like it's been used or even applying that effect to things that don't make sense, like bread. Like why would
Yeah.
bread crack, right? But we could sort of play around with that a little bit. But it would come in handy for highlights, so we could just focus on making this cheesier look cheesier. Yeah.
Yeah, the dot highlights add a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of gives like a wet texture.
Yeah, it does. I like that. And it adds like a almost a feather that you don't
Yeah.
typically get in Illustrator, which is very nice. I mean, you could add subtle like Gaussian blurs or some sort of drop shadow in Illustrator, but it bogs the machine down for me. So I know where I'm gonna take this illustration, whether it's gonna be print or it's gonna be a sticker. Typically before I get to this stage, so I just make sure my resolution's high enough in Photoshop, and you got nothing to worry about. But yeah, let's add these little highlights. And it just makes such a difference.
Mm-hmm.
It's so wild. Yeah, and we can even do that for the bread here a little bit. I'll just be a little rough about this. Just make it imperfect. Yeah. I think it's cool. Just a little
Yeah,
bit
that
of key
looks
lining.
great. Yeah.
Add some of those little dots over here. I'm sure some sticklers will say, well, the light source isn't over there.
Hey, that's
But
illustration.
I know. I want it to be glaring. This is the cheesiest of cheese. Yeah, I think I could do something like that.
That's another one of those, I think, personal style choices
Mm-hmm.
is kind of being a little liberal with where your lighting is and where your highlights are.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not necessarily perfectly realistic, but
Yeah,
it still works for an illustration.
for sure. And make it your own. Let's see what else. I'm thinking. I'm gonna tint this texture again. Okay, now it's working. That's what was going on. I had the wrong brush setting down here selected while changing the brush setting. So these are the little guys. You see the little subtlety, little noise that's being added.
Mm-hmm.
These little guys.
Oh yeah,
Those are the moneymaker.
noise is so nice. It adds a very vintage look.
Mm-hmm. And if you sort of layer your different presets and like all of these different like color modes that you could add to it, it brings a whole different look to it. Like even right now I'm adding these textures on top. It's like, oh, that doesn't look good, but I know I'm gonna add a preset to that, which is gonna make it blend, because those different blend modes are really what enhances it. So I'll go to here and then let's say soft light maybe. That just made it disappear completely, so I want to see it a little bit. Maybe let's do it hard light and then adjust the opacity. Yeah. And for final touch, let's get back in here and see what we could bring out color-wise.
Yeah, so we just got like a couple more minutes. We might actually need to start signing off here pretty soon, yeah. But I mean, you basically finished it. I mean, awesome job, so. Because you were worried that you weren't going to finish it. I mean, perfect timing.
It's
props to you.
Yeah, it turned out good. It's definitely
Yeah.
definitely enjoy the help and suggestions because sometimes in these processes you sort of forget different things
Mm-hmm.
and like the highlights. I mean, I'm looking at it right now and just to sum it up, it's like these little highlights here, here just make such a difference. Some other things I would add with more time is like think about the shadow that's being cast on the bottom loaf of the bread from the cheese,
Right.
right? Or even the shadow that might get cast on the pencil because maybe there's a shadow on the bottom half, or maybe there's a different shadow over here underneath the cheese on the bread. This could have a shadow underneath. Yeah, we could just add more and more, and sometimes your time is the end mark,
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
you can add a little
Well,
here.
thank you all so much for watching today. And don't forget to follow Tyler on Behance and Instagram. And also stick around up right after this. We have the Daily Creative Challenge for Illustrator with Codi. And then after that, we actually have another Codi stream for how to, and she's actually going to be teaching you guys how to create a menu. So we're going to be having more food streams after this. So we got a Cloddy marathon after this. So looking forward to that. Thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you right up next on the Daily Creative Challenge. Bye,
Thank
guys.
you.